Hello, Fuel Milwaukee. Come on in the room. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Corey Jo Biddle, and I'm the Executive Director for Fuel Milwaukee. I am so glad to have you all here participating in this conversation that we're calling the white reaction to racial injustice against others. I want to thank you all for taking the time to participate in this discussion, and thanks to the panelists who are participating with us. This is an important discussion, and it will be a candid conversation about the white response to anti-Black sentiment and racist structure. So my intention with this discussion is to give voice to the experience of white people who realize that their Black brothers, sisters, siblings are facing overt, covert, and systematic forms of racism. I'm personally curious, very curious about the challenge of discussing racism as a white person and the guilt that people might feel and why, how to handle not knowing what to say, and how to speak up when you see injustice around you, when we all kind of live in a society that is complicit in this racism. So this is going to be a casual kind of conversation about being an ally, what people see for themselves, how you respond to white people who either get it, want to get it, don't get it. I just kind of want to broach the conversation. So a lot of you have participated in the Fuel webinars before. You've seen the conversations that we've had around race when I had a very similar conversation with all Black folks. And that conversation made me want to have this conversation because of all of the comments in the chat around, you know, what do I do? What do I say? And I just really thought, you know what? This is probably a challenge for people. And it's probably a challenge to say that it's a challenge because that can be taken as you don't get it, you don't care. And, you know, we know that that's not the case. So I want to thank the panelists that agreed to do this with me because I know some of y'all and some of you all were introduced to me because I kind of put out a call on Facebook to say, hey, any of my, you know, white friends or friends of friends want to have this conversation. And I got a bunch of brave people that stepped up and said that they wanted to participate in this. And I have enough people that we could do this discussion like 4 times. More than that, I have more than enough people that want to talk about it. So maybe we will do a part 2. If you want to see a part 2, make sure you leave me a comment and let me know. So I'm going to introduce the panelists quickly, and then we'll kind of get right into the questions. Jonathan Brostoff is an assembly rep with the Wisconsin State Assembly. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, you got my wedding picture up.
Is it? I thought that was the prettiest one. I was looking online and I was like, that's a great photo.
I do look pretty in there. Yes,
you do. You look really pretty there.
Thank you.
Nicole Agresano, most of you guys know her. If you're following her on Facebook, it's a treat. If not, add her. You don't want to miss her post. She's the VP of Community Impact for the United Way. Hey, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me, and I miss my pre-COVID hair. Nice to see it again.
That's pretty lush hair.
Yeah,
I like that bang, that little sweep. That's a good sweep there. Stephanie Harling. Stephanie's the Executive Director of the Haven Woods Economic Development Corp. Hey, Stephanie.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
My COVID hair looks like this all the time, evidently. Looking at that picture, I don't even have an excuse. This is just what it is.
It looks great. It looks great. Next up, we got Jennifer Reisman. Now, Jennifer and I went to Mount Mary together, so you know she's an exceptionally intelligent and bright young woman because she went to Mount Mary and because she's the assistant professor of psychiatry and behavioral science at Johns Hopkins University. And she has some other jobs too. She does other stuff, but hey, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to connect back to folks in Milwaukee. I feel like Baltimore is our sister city. So
that's right.
Pleasure to be here.
Representing Milwaukee on the East Coast. Keep doing your thing out there. And we have Sam Woods, who is today our resident reporter. Hey, Sam.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gorjo, and for everyone who want to join in this discussion. I see a lot of people jumped in, so that's encouraging.
Yeah, we got a lot of folks in the discussion. And so speaking of the folks that are listening as participants, hey, go into the chat and let me know why this conversation was interesting to you and why you wanted to participate. Just leave us a little note. A lot of the panelists will be able to see what you're saying and respond. And as we go along, I'll also be prompting you to give us some more comments and feedback, okay? So if you are on Facebook, this is streaming live on Facebook, so please share it so other people can see it, okay? All right, so the first question that I have so many questions, but I think what I'll ask is, and I want all of you to answer it, I'll start with you, Nicole. When I asked you to participate in this discussion, why did you say yes, and why did you think this was important?
Yeah, so first of all, just absolute gratitude for being asked in the first place. I think it's humbling, and it's also a little daunting. You know, I am somebody who is comfortable talking about this stuff a lot, but I don't always get it right. And I think, you know, part of my sort of desire to be in these spaces is to really help folks who are either, you know, who want to be allies, who are ally adjacent, who are aspiring to be conspirators and co-conspirators. I want to give permission to them to know that it isn't easy. It's not easy for those of us who have been doing it for a while, and there's no finish line, right? Like, you don't just become an ally and then you've checked it off and now I'm that, right? It's a constant opportunity to learn and grow and readjust. And so just to be able to be in this space with these other wonderful panelists to talk about our own journeys, and I think face some tough questions and tough truths ourselves is really valuable. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. How about you, Stephanie?
Well, yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunity too, because, you know, I'm frustrated and I'm stressed out, and I'm frustrated with what I'm seeing within my own white community and white circles, just the lack of information that they have and how we got here. And, you know, I want to figure out how to have that conversation about, you know, this goes beyond way before people were being brutalized by the police. We've got centuries of trauma and centuries of policies from the government and the private sector that we're still dealing with today. And how do I inform and educate without being overbearing? And, you know, we know when we've been on the opposite ends of these conversations that if you are too overbearing and you are too academic, people think you're condescending to them and they take offense to it. And so it's that kind of conversation between, without getting too politicized, between the liberal and the conservative. The liberal is always talking down to someone, and then the conservative on the other end thinks that you think they're stupid. And so how do we have that conversation without being condescending, without being judgmental, but still informing and educating? So, you know, and I hate to put the labels on people, but I don't know how else to do that spectrum right now. But that's one of the reasons, is to just learn from all of you, and how I might better have that conversation.
How about you, Jonathan? Why did you want to be a part of this conversation? Why did you say yes?
Because you asked me. I trust Corey Jo very much, and she's a smart cookie, and if she asks me to do something, I'm down for whatever. So you let me know.
Well, you've been out there doing a lot, so I mean, I knew you were one of the people that I knew I could ask.
Appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, I mean, I trust you a lot. I know you very well and the work you've done. Appreciate all you do. And, you know, I try to put myself in the circles of people who I think are doing good stuff in the world. And if they ask me to something, like, all right, let's go. So, I mean, I to be totally frank, I didn't know exactly what the conversation was or whatever. I just got the message from you, like, hey, you come, you know, do this, whatever. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, like, it's a Jewish thing too. Like, I'll say that there's a when we were given the Bible on Mount Sinai, as the story goes, it was said, like, you know, God goes to all these other peoples first, and then he goes to the Jews, and the Jews are like, yeah, we'll take it. Wait, what's in there? You know, so it's like, I'm down for it. You let me know whatever I'm talking about. So it's kind of like that. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to help, and I appreciate the work you do and stuff like that.
Thank you so much. Jennifer.
Well, one, I can say ditto, that if Corey Joe asks, you say yes. And that two, I think there's a sense of responsibility as a white woman and also as a mom and just someone in this space. I work in the field of mental health. I work with little kids and families. I work with lots of families that are carrying a ton of trauma, and that this is not new. And that what I hope to be able to contribute is some actual advancing of our discussion and also permission to help advance our actions, not just our discussion, because I think that's a significant point to me. So that's also one reason I said yes, because it's one thing for me to like or agree or to tweet or to do these things, but to actually stand up publicly and have discussions is something that I feel a great responsibility to help model as a mom and as a decent person right now.
That's great. Thank you. How about you, Sam?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I know just as a young person, like trying to figure out the world, I'm always looking for mentors and role models. And I think it's what's I've been having trouble finding is like good white people role models. I know I typically look for role models in your family. That's just not something I like. That's just not an option as far as like how to be a good white person, an anti-racist white person. And so I'm always on the lookout for examples to follow. But then also, I think a lot of times, well, speaking for myself, I'm afraid to say something unless it's perfect. And so I'm gonna jump anytime I have the opportunity to talk about racism, for example, and have the opportunity to fumble out loud, I'm gonna take it. So that's pretty much that's it. That's why I'm here.
A well-meaning fumble is a welcome.
Right. I'll do my best. Yeah.
So I want to say, because I know that there's all kinds of people with all different sorts of backgrounds on this call. In this discussion, I only get tripped up or have fumbles of my own when I'm thinking about now I'm very careful about saying people of color when I really mean Black, and being a Black person that is the head of an organization that's very diverse. Most fuel members are white people. So I have to always be conscious of the content that I put out and the fact that we have Black, brown, red, yellow members in the membership. So in some of my language, I'm going to be referring to Black people and the Black Lives Matter movement, because in this moment, it's a great moment that I think is important for the millions of Black lives who have gone their entire lives wondering if they matter, because I know that feeling. And part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because it feels good to see so many people saying Black Lives Matter. And they do. All lives matter, yes. But I'm saying that because there are other people who are listening and participating in the discussion who are people of color that have different religious backgrounds, sexual orientations, that have all experienced oppression. And this conversation is a nod to all of us. We could all quote Dr. King and all these other people. This discussion, everything that I'm saying as a Black person, and all of the conversations that we're going to have, we're giving a nod and respecting everybody that has had this experience. So I just wanted to make sure that I say that. But as a Black person, I'm just happy and grateful for this moment. So I started this last conversation, the conversation that I had with Black folks, with asking them what was their first experience with racism, when did they first feel it? For you, I want to ask, when was the moment when you first saw racism against someone else? Do you remember that? And can you tell us a little bit about that story? Stephanie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I'm born and raised in Milwaukee. I'm born and raised on the south side of Milwaukee. And for those of you who have lived in Milwaukee all of your lives, you know the physical barrier of the viaduct between Black and white in Milwaukee. And that culture is what I was exposed to probably from birth. And that, that automatic racism that was just always there. And it was, I had a stepfather that was a good man, but had his racial biases and made them very known. And, it just speaks to how complicated we all are. You can have good people that have bad ideas. I was fortunate in that I had a strong mother who did not share those views, and she was an activist in public education, and she embraced and worked toward equal education for all kids of all races, and that was what she devoted her civic life to. So I was exposed to that. So I'm so grateful to that, because it set me up for who I am today in my career and things like that. So that's my first, born with it, just born with it. I will say the most impactful situation that I had was as an adult, and I work with many minority contractors that have been very good to me, and I'm so grateful to them. And I tried to introduce them to my world so that they would have more business opportunities. And I saw the wall that was put up in keeping that from happening, even to the point where someone in an organization had asked this minority contractor who had been in business for 25 years if he has tools. And this is a man that has a fleet of trucks, completely competent. And I thought, what is this about? So, I've seen it play out in very overt ways, and I've seen it play out in very subtle ways. And so I'm just a little appalled by it all.
How about you, Jonathan?
The first time, growing up in Milwaukee as well, and going to mostly majority Black schools and stuff like that, I think it was very evident from a pretty young age. But there's a lot I could mention, but I'll just give a couple short stories if that's okay. I remember when I was in third grade, my best friend was telling me about, his weekend and my weekend, stuff like that. And just hearing about how I was used to getting oatmeal and orange juice for breakfast, and he was talking about Flamin' Hots and Coca-Cola. I couldn't quite pick it up on my, I didn't quite understand exactly what that, it's hard to articulate, but it felt something off right there. And that was a situation I was like, wow, that doesn't seem right type stuff and stuff like that, so that felt, I don't know why, but I was 7 or 8 years old, I guess, but that felt like something that really kind of stuck in my craw as a big disparity, even though, it's my best friend, we hung out all the time, stuff like that. We're going home to very different type situations. Number two, I would say, I remember in a little bit older in middle school, I would hear stories about my friends who would be going back to school or when I going about their business. And, one of my friends in particular really sticks out, my guy Alfonso, who I'm still close with today, but back then we were at middle school together, and he was over at Hartford, but he was, a bigger guy, but the kind of sweetest guy in the world. But he would talk about basically going home to school and stuff like that, and regularly having the cops put him on the ground face down, or against the car, rough him up and stuff like this, because he quote unquote fit the description, and stuff like that or whatever, even though he had not done anything wrong and had nothing to do with drugs or whatever they were talking about that time. But my experience with the cops was so different. I'm thinking cops is baseball cards and bubble gum, because that's, they're at the 4th of July parade. That's what I think about cops, because I was a white kid, and I had that different experience. And it took me till probably about high school, actually, probably, maybe even, and it feels embarrassing to say that, but that's the truth of it. But it took me quite a while even to understand that, no, when I'm hearing these stories about him and others, it's not just people trying to get attention or, all that jibber jabber, that's their real experience. And it might be wildly different from my life's experience and stuff like that, but that's real and that's happening, and I shouldn't be, thinking less of it. And I think I mentioned that story because sometimes today as an adult, I witnessed that phenomenon where people with very different life experiences and got all their blue lives matter and this and that. They might be thinking something completely different and don't even believe all that stuff going on, even though we do now live in an era we've had 10 years of cell phone footage and stuff like that or whatever, as well as body cams. So, I can think about little kid Jonathan going through that mental process and then seeing people today even having that stuff even more as adults. I'd say number three, and last but not least, was I remember very clearly in sixth grade, and one of my teachers who was white, but also, and which was the majority of the case, we had a lot of white female teachers. The majority of the schools are also predominantly black schools and stuff like that. So she was correcting someone who used a common vernacular at the time, which was, I think it's something from a southern thing, but it's like, I finster, I finna go do this or finna go do that, which meant like I'm going to do something or gonna go do this or gonna go do that, but it's just another way to say that. And it was something that everyone understood exactly what they were talking about. But when, which to me, and my brother, who's a linguistics major, taught me this, like language is just people using symbols to communicate ideas to each other, which the student was effectively doing. Everyone understood what he was saying, but the teacher used this as an opportunity to berate him in front of the class for like 10 minutes and yell at him about how, like, are you a fit? It says China, are you doing fishing? You're finning. She was, it wasn't even funny, but she was trying to like make fun of him basically and stuff like that in front of everyone. And again, I was a little bit older at that time, obviously, so I could understand things a little better. But even there, it's like, that really kind of hit a nerve with me, and it was very upsetting, and still something that strikes me to today, because when you publicly embarrass, or when you tried even with the intention of publicly embarrassment, I don't know if he was embarrassed or not by that, but that can really, be really damaging, especially coming from an authority figure, and be really mean-spirited in a certain way psychologically. So those are just three quick examples. But I got plenty. I mean, growing up, like I said, white in Milwaukee was a whole bunch of stuff like that or whatever.
How about you, Nicole?
So I love listening to these stories. It really paints an interesting picture. A couple of things. One is that, I feel like I got a little bit of a head start on this. I have two very liberal, very socially aware parents. This was not something that was new to me. I think a lot of times I have white friends that come to this not having had any family history of talking about it, history in their family of advocating for causes. And so I really did have the benefit of starting early. I also grew up in a town called Farmville, Virginia. And in Farmville, Virginia, rather than integrate the schools per President Kennedy's order in the 60s, they closed all the schools and then educated white students only in church basements, and then opened a school that was still open to this day only for white students. And so that's my hometown. And so there was never a moment in my childhood or teenage years that I wasn't acutely aware of something being wrong. There was also a moment when I was a teen, I was probably 19 or 20, and I remember this because I felt such shame afterwards. It was the summer between going to college and grad school, or I didn't have insurance for some reason, so I must have been a little bit older. But I went to a free clinic to get services for a health issue. And it was in Richmond, Virginia, which is also very similar to Milwaukee and Baltimore, in that it's racially and ethnically diverse, but still very have and have not and segregated, although nothing like Milwaukee, which is a very different place. And I was in the waiting room, and I was not there first. And I was probably, when I got there, it was already full. And a nurse or an assistant came out, and she pointed at me and she called me back into the thing. And I went. And it took me a while to realize what had happened, which was that she saw my white face in this clinic, and she immediately picked me to come back and get medical care. And I didn't, I don't want to say in my defense, because there's no defense, but I was there because I had a medical issue. I was certainly stressed. I was probably relieved at the time to be seen so quickly, because you never know how long you're going to be at a clinical setting like that. But I didn't do anything to say it wasn't my turn or I wasn't here first. And so I try to keep that in my mind when I have opportunities to say, no, it's not my turn, or should somebody else do this, or can somebody else go in my place? And so that's something that sticks in my head a lot.
How about you, Sam?
Yeah, really quickly, I just want to really quickly, and then I'll get to the story, I promise. So I come at this is well-meaning. I'm just like, as a learning space, not trying to call people out, but Stephanie, just wanted to, I know you used the word minority a couple times to refer to, I think in reference to Black and brown people. And I just want to I don't know, I know this my understanding is that like person of color or saying black or brown, to Porgia's earlier point, is kind of the way to go. So again, just well-meaning, not trying to call you
Oh,
out.
I appreciate it.
Just
You know,
like,
and
Yeah.
that's a great point. And part of that is because of my field of work, it's an all-encompassing kind of, it's
Yeah, I
industry
mean,
lingo, but I appreciate
yeah,
that.
and like
Yeah,
some industries are
totally.
outdated and everything. I just
Yeah.
wanted to, I wanted to say it before moving on. So,
Oh,
but to
no
this,
offense. No
yeah,
offense taken.
that's why
Thank
we're
you.
here, right? So,
Yep, absolutely.
yeah, and as far as the story, I'll try to. I think it was in like second or third grade. I want to say third grade. This kid named Aaron. We were both athletes as much as an athlete can be in third grade, but like we would be active. We weren't just like sitting around talking in recess. We were playing sports or playing tag or something. And it wasn't a specific instance that I remember, but I know he was always, or the recess teacher was always, and he's black. It was always on him about something or other, just like hands off. You're too far out in the grass or something, like, yeah, I can't see you or something like that, to the point where like he would, and in retrospect was way more than me or the white kids. And I know I was in third grade, not in defense, right? But I didn't really grasp that this was, in the racism bucket rather than just like, teachers are whack. But yeah, I remember him like kind of like commenting on the like a recess teacher, I don't remember her name, is always on me about this and that, and he'd like kind of like lash out at her in front of her, or like we talk about it behind her back. But I was kind of like, again, like as a third grader, I was just like, yeah, teachers, man. It's just us versus them. I just didn't see it as until someone asked me this question pretty recently, like within the last few years, like what was your first, I forgot how you phrased it, but like first instance of racism that you remember. I'm sure there was instances before that, but that's the earliest that I remember looking back, at least being like, yeah, there was, that was racist.
How about you? Oh, I got Jennifer.
Yeah, and I just want to comment that from a professional standpoint, it's really interesting that when you ask white people this question, oftentimes the first example that they can give you is something that's more recent or adulthood. And I think that actually gets to one of these things where as white people, we often aren't growing up. And I think, some of us have raised that even when you grow up in an environment that is exposing you more or talking about these things, that we often don't use the term in a lot of white families or in a lot of white spaces of talking about racism and when you see it as a white person and naming that, especially with small children. And so I think that I just want to throw that out there, because as I was thinking about this question and listening to everyone's stories, I was going, I know I have examples. So as a little kid, I grew up on the north side of Milwaukee, moved to the south side of Milwaukee when I was probably in middle school. But as a little kid on the north side of Milwaukee on 42nd and Villard, I had black and brown friends and I had white friends. There was one really good friend on the corner who had a pool, and I was allowed to play in her pool, but not all of the other kids on the block were allowed to play in the pool. And so when I think back now as an adult, I can think about that was a really I was, seeing racism acting out on my block as a 4-year-old. My parents, I cannot recall having a discussion with them about that. Like, why did they then let me go? Like, because I have this thought now of if that happened in my, block right now, if someone said, no, I'm not going to let the black kids go in the pool, would I let my daughter over to play at that house? Probably not. But I don't think that, the experience 30 years ago was the same. And so I think that we probably all collectively as white people have these early experiences and memories of seeing racism when we were young, but we probably didn't kind of store that away and label it as racism, and coming to terms with some of that is really helpful. I mean, I can tell you as an adult, like the first time that I know that I stood up and named something as racism publicly, and that's a really clear memory. But little kid ones, that's a lot harder. And I think that's something as white folks we have to reckon with.
Yeah, and especially because it's like sorry, Corey, really quick, but especially because it's like every day. I mean, it's in like children's books. I know like children's books I was reading, either you know, they were animals or something. But if they were human, usually fair tone skin, maybe like, I don't know, but white. We'll say white for the sake of this. But yeah, I mean, it's just like in the air we breathe, right? So of course you're going to have, even if you don't remember them, you probably don't remember most of them, but it's just like something you're kind of absorbing and encoding, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
I'm going to share a quick video just for the sake. I shared this in the previous video, but for the sake of discussion, because I do want to talk about those moments of racism that white people seem to be quiet about. This helps to illustrate the point a little bit, and then we'll.
I want every white person in this room who would be happy to be treated as this society in general treats our citizens, our black citizens. If you, as a white person, would be happy to receive the same treatment that our black citizens do in this society, please stand. You didn't understand the directions. If you white folks want to be treated the way blacks are in this society, stand. Nobody's standing here. That says very plainly that you know what's happening. You know you don't want it for you. I want to know why you're so willing to accept it or to allow it to happen for others.
The reason why I wanted to share that is because I think part of the frustration, at least for me, is that until this moment, there's a consistent and heavy denial, I think, of the fact that racism is real and it exists and it happens to people today. I can't tell you how many times I've brought up an instance of like clear racism, and the white person that I was talking to was like, maybe it wasn't that. So I just want to have a conversation about that. Is it cognitive dissonance? Do people not really know? Are they not sure what to say? I mean, that video to me makes it clear that people kind of know, even if they don't know to the extent that I do. Why are people white folks so complicit and quiet about it when they see it, in your experience? Anybody can jump in. I'll just let you guys jump in as you want.
Well, first of all, Jane Elliott's a boss, and I just want to say that out loud. I've learned I want to be her when I grow up. I've been watching and listening to her for years, and I just want to put out there that she's as good a resource for this as anybody is. And so just thank you for sharing that clip, and she's wonderful. You know, I think a lot. This is a really great question, and I think the question is complicity, and the question is people don't want to believe it's racism, right? There's this sort of thing where, like, you know, but one of the things is this concept of color blindness, and that people really believe or want to believe in their hearts that this is where this all lives matter nonsense comes from. It's this concept of, you know, we're all human beings and we all make mistakes and we all, you know, are held accountable the same way. And I think a lot of folks really believe that. I think there's a lot of fear. I think there's a lot of social pressure, or the perception of social pressure. People are not necessarily interested in being, I'll call it confrontation. I don't even think it's confrontation. It's just speaking up and doing the right thing. But we have a culture where folks are told to mind their business or not to cause problems, or that's just Aunt Judy. Aunt Judy's 60. She says that kind of stuff. And I just saw this pop up, and it triggered something else, which is, as white people, we're pretty damn comfortable with the role and the position that we're in. So why am I going to get but so upset about it? And so I think all of those things play into this. I also think that white people have to acknowledge that good intentions and being well-meaning are not enough. And there has to be a willingness to do some really hard work here. I don't want to hear any more about book clubs. I don't want to hear any more about, and I read the books, don't get me wrong, like there's some great work out there, but that kind of sort of self-congratulatory behavior around, I'm doing all this work to learn about the history, that's not enough. I think it's foundational. I think it's important, but there's real work to be done here. So let's do the work and let's have the tough conversations.
Sam, I see you in the amen corner.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of add on to that, I think what I'm seeing, you've seen this before in white people, and I've done it, but especially now, you've seen a lot of posts like, what can I read? What can I do? Book clubs, groups I can go to. And I think that's, it's not, to your question, Corjo, it's not like ignoring the problem or like reason not to talk about it. It's like a stalling tactic almost is kind of what it seems. It's like, yeah, I mean, you're just, this is remedial. Like, you should be doing this to just kind of catch up. And the fact that if you're just asking what books can I read, you're still doing that a month from now. That's not work. That's performative. I don't know what it is, but it's not the work, right? Yeah, that was my amen. So I think Nicole hit it on the head.
I have books, right? I read them too.
And you should absolutely be like decolonizing your bookshelf, decolonizing your life, of course. But like, I mean, that's not it. That's not enough. It's a bare minimum.
Jennifer, is there some psychological thing going on as we can?
Well, and I have to say, so also you've had a lot of people comment on, so I want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat that's been contributing, because I just want to say you're all right? So people have already said and put in the chat, there's guilt, there's comfort in white privilege, there's recognition of all of these kind of systemic structures. And I think that gets really hard. And I know that there's a number of people online watching that have, kind of posted some questions about like, what can I do from my position of leadership or within my organization, is that I feel like we also do have to step back and say, hey, wait a second, all of these organizations and structures that we've set up, and I can say academia is one of them, schools are one of them, have all been set up, and I use the term to say, in white supremacy structures. And that when they've been set up in that way, we do have to kind of step back and question and go, just because we've always done things this way, if we change the way of that, how much do we really have to think back and question some of our like just very basic assumptions about who gets into colleges, who are we training and mentoring from our next generation, and how are we making these decisions that when we really step back as leaders and organizations, it's hard. And I don't think we should necessarily shy away from it. And I think also kind of just giving permission for people to take little steps and big steps, and to have, to really put out what is our goal here. Because at least white people are fantastic goal-oriented chasers, right? Like when we think about what's white culture, and there's all these goals and individualism and all of this other stuff that, like, can we harness that to make actual change? I hope so.
Let's talk about the big steps a little bit, because some of the questions that have been coming my way, either through email or social media, is about the construct of racism and how it's kind of woven into the fabric of our society. What's the big step that folks need to take? And I mean, people have been asking me, and I'm like, I don't know, you built it, you fixed it. And I'm just wondering, what, in your work, where do you see some of the big steps that can be taken to kind of dismantle this? I'll let anybody jump in there.
Corey Jo, one of the things that you said, I just wanted to add to Jennifer's, because she said something about systems. And I think the first acknowledgement is this: when people say systems are broken, my answer is no, they're not. Systems are working exactly as they were designed to work. And that's for the privileged to get more privileged. So what you have to be willing to do, in addition to self-work and learning, and I don't want to be dismissive of that. I feel like I was too flippant. I want you to read, trust me. I just don't want to hear about it so much as though it's a thing. Is that we have to examine in our own lives, to Jen's point, where she works, where I work at United Way, what are those things that I'm reinforcing or keeping in place, or not willing to challenge in a way that may be very disruptive to the system. But these systems ain't working for everybody. And so we need overhaul. I don't need little tiny bits of things here. This is a time to talk about bold, brave changes. That's why this is such an important moment, because incrementalism and these little tiny little things aren't going to get us where we need to go. And so I don't know what the change is, but I know that we need a lot of them, and that we have to be willing, to do that work in our own homes, our own faith communities, and I think in particular our own places of business, given how much is controlled there in terms of income and all of those things that are at play there.
Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm kind of getting lost in my thoughts. Can you restate the question real quick one more time, then I'll say something.
Yeah, I was just asking about what big steps we can take to look at this, the structure. And somebody in the chat just said, I don't think any of us built this. We're just benefiting from it. And I would push back on that just a little bit, because every organization that starts or is formed, every conversation that excludes people, every neighborhood committee that upholds this, I mean, I think it's kind of a pattern and a roadmap that our society has continued to follow. And I'm not saying that people are just consciously saying, let's exclude, X, Y, and Z, but the systems exclude. And I think we kind of know about it. So I'm just questioning what are some of the big steps? I mean, is it legislation? Is it, defunding? What is it?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think there's a couple kind of big steps. I guess I would take that at the macro level. I think there's some significant policy changes that need to be addressed that could really change things up. And it's stuff that we kind of have really taken for granted right now, or just accepted and said, and even with, again, 10 years or more of cell phone footage of like police brutality, for example, where again, these are stories that are maybe getting ignored before, but now you can see it. And just imagine an alien coming down to our society who has no experience, like that, being like, wait a second, you have these cops, like you guys have all this cell phone footage, and Flannel Castile, and he's and shoots, and the cop goes free. Like, what? Like, there's these murders that are happening. It's like, it wouldn't really make sense, except we kind of accept it because it's the momentum of the status quo, I suppose. But I think that there's a lot of shifts that we need to make, and quite frankly, if you're growing, you're not comfortable, and if you're comfortable, you are not growing. And as a society and as individuals, we need to make people really uncomfortable and challenge some of the norms, because the sort of stagnation that keeps people comfortable is really oppressive and horrible. But the people benefiting from it are like, whatever, like, I'm getting mine, that type stuff. And whether they want to say that out loud, that's what's happening. So I would like to see, significant shift in allocation of resources is a good step at the macro level. And even at the, micro level, like, I think a lot of the core issues are kind of around like the ego, and that cuts both ways. And it cuts kind of on the conservative side of things, on the liberal side of things. And, there's like, for example, there's people who are like, well, I'm not racist. I don't say the N-word. I'm not racist. I don't engage in any of that type stuff. And that's their experience. That's what they think it is. And that's, their understanding things. Like, I have a black friend. And that's what you hear over and over and over, when it's uncomfortable to kind of look a little deeper and beyond the surface, and to say like, well, there's much larger things at play than just you saying an N-word, type stuff. Why is it that there's such a proclivity for cops to go, beat up black people and stuff like that, or murder them? Why is that? Is that, it's not, it can't, there has to be a reason for it. And are you saying that everyone's asking for it, even when that's clearly not the case? Or are you saying there's something else going on? Why is that? Why is it certain people are like scary? Why is it when people move to neighborhood, like it goes on, home loans, people's names replicate, So, but then on the liberal side, there's kind of like this ego where it's like, well, I'm going to prove myself so much more by putting all these other people down. That's where I'm going to invest my energy. And that's kind of like not really, if there is a helpfulness to it, because kind of comes from that place, but it's really more about one's own ego and like kind of boost, it's like showing yourself, and that's more about ego as well, as opposed to doing something that's going to make you uncomfortable. So I would say at the macro level, we should all be working to make ourselves uncomfortable constantly, because it's the comfort wherein lies the evil. And at the macro level, there's some significantly uncomfortable conversations need to be had. We have a racist police force in Milwaukee that's been operating well before Breyer, and you're talking about the last couple hundred years. Oh yeah, look at that history. And the challenges to the norm, the marches going on, the protests, and people getting a little bit uncomfortable.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, am I going off?
No,
Can I
go
not
ahead.
talk about cops on here?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. They found me. CIA just muted me, or whoever that was, FBI or whoever. Anyway, it's like you challenge their funding, a little bit. Even, today we saw like the Common Council now, because of the marching, because people are getting up there, is leading to a conversation of now a 10% cut. And yeah, it's only 30 million, which all things considered, there could be more money, but that conversation wasn't available even 3 weeks ago. Now, why is it here? Well, because people are being made uncomfortable. And that, by the way, think about that as a society. Think about that, white people who want to be comfortable in your own skin, stuff like that. Because a couple years ago, 2016, Colin Kaepernick, in a very comfortable way, said, I'm going to take a knee in a peaceful protest and exercise freedom of speech and da-da-da, that stuff. And the president of the United States called him the son of a bitch. And he had all these people coming after him, burning jerseys, this and that, woo-doo-woo. And now he's talking about police brutality. Nothing really systemically changed. More and more situations are coming up. Now it's on camera and stuff's popping off, and only at about a 1% pop-off rate. And that's making people really scared and really uncomfortable. And that's a little bit of disruption. But through that disruption, we're seeing change now, maybe. But if that's not heard and that's not listened to, what's the next level of elevation? So do you want to be real safe, or do you want to just feel safe?
The idea of this disruption,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
and creating that disruption and discomfort, like Stephanie, I mean, you have a lot of influence in the world of business and economics. And for you, what has it been to sort of have those conversations when you're challenging the status quo? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because
I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can relate. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to have that. It has been difficult. And to Jonathan's point, I made the decision to be comfortable and not have the difficult conversations. But now, I'm at a point, a level of frustration where I'm ready to have the uncomfortable conversations with our business owners and start challenging, even in my own little microcosm, the systems that we've developed to eliminate people from the workforce, even using, in the degree that they're using technology to even hire is definitely a way to keep people out of the economic mainstream. So that's one thing I would want to challenge. I mean, there's so much I want. It's, the banning of the box, of the, being forced to tell someone that you want to be employed by, whether you have a felony or not. Like, well, now you're eliminating so many people from being able to build themselves up. So challenging myself in my own kind of micro way, in my own community that I'm working in, and within our own business community, because that's really where I'm seeing a lot of the unconscious stuff happening, and how people receive people and how they relate to people, and how Black people are talked to differently in an interview than they are white people. And I've seen it. And it's disturbing. So definitely that. Also, lending in Milwaukee commercial lending in Milwaukee is not transparent. And Jonathan, I would look to you for policy on that. Because right now, well, there's transparency in Black mortgages. There's no transparency in lending available in commercial, which completely eliminates any potential for entrepreneurship within the Black community. So that's another thing that I really want to challenge heavily in my own world here. So those are some huge barriers for us: employment and economic opportunity.
So Corey Jo,
that I would challenge. I'm sorry, I'm done. Sorry.
Nicole?
I was just going to say, a lot of the questions that have popped up, we're on a call here with membership of the MMAC. And I think one of the things that frustrates me is that a lot of times corporations and companies turn to social services to sort of solve our societal ills. They come to United Way and Greater Milwaukee Foundation and the YWCA and they say, we're very upset about this. What can you do about it? And I think what I'm hearing from the callers, or what I'm reading in the chat, is what can you do about it? Where are the opportunities for your office to ban the box? Where are the opportunities for your office to put in place or support policies that extend transportation opportunities so folks can get jobs out in the outer counties? Where are the opportunities for you to talk to your leadership about what your companies, who quite frankly, some of which have, a whole lot more money and power and access to influence makers than the rest of us have, what can you do rather than constantly, and I'm saying you generally, not anybody specifically, rather than constantly looking to someone else to solve your problem or hand-wringing? There are clearly things that can happen in human resources, in how you choose your vendors, in how Stephanie said, getting hired, shoot, get interviewed with a Black sounding name. I mean, let's be serious about these barriers that are at all the doors of our businesses. And let's say, what can I do? Fill in the blank to business partners. I love you guys. You're such wonderful partners. But let's be serious. There are things you can do internally that will have a huge impact on one of the most critical issues, which is the underemployment and unemployment of Blacks in this community. You want to talk about something that contributes to bad health, that contributes to criminal status, that contributes to families that are not flourishing. It is the unemployment and underemployment in particular of Black men in Milwaukee, and something that people on this call can do something about almost immediately.
Absolutely. There is no law that any business has to ask if someone is a felon. They choose to ask that question, and they know they can. So that will be the challenge. You don't need to ask this question.
Stop asking the question.
Stop asking it. You don't need a law to tell you that.
But can you get to the big step and actually maybe even frame whatever for business leaders, for people on this, thinking about what can I do? What are those steps? I would challenge them to actually put the R word in their repertoire and actually conceptualize what are reparations. What does my organization, my system need to do as that initial step to make things right? And that's where I feel at least inspired, looking at college students, looking to activists that have done some things, that have made some changes. At my institution, they made it so there's no longer legacy admissions at Hopkins. They thought they would lose all this money from donors. They didn't. They recruited a more diverse class of students that was more successful. And I think sometimes we have as white people, there's a really negative connotation with that, but we really shouldn't be afraid of that word, along with racism and reparations.
The R words.
The R words.
So everybody go ahead. Was that Sam? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be brief. And what was I gonna say? Wow. On reparations, I think one thing that I don't think was mentioned, I apologize if it was, but one thing that you can do after you join the book clubs and do the readings and all that, well, at the same time, there's no reason you can't do it is donate. Give people money. Give people of color money. Give Black people money specifically, especially in Milwaukee. There are organizations that specifically help. I know of one that's Black women specifically, but help Black people meet rent. And is this a systemic change? No, it's an individual action, but it's something that while we're waiting for the government to get around on reparations, we don't have to wait for you to do that. And especially if you're, for however many people are in the chat, the 231 of you, I assume some of you are salaried, living very comfortably. And I would challenge you to give at least 10% of your salary away to people of color. I think that's, if you're serious about being anti-racist, that's a legit place to start, rather than just I need to read the autobiography of Malcolm X.
So as we have people in the chat, and the chat is really good. I'm gonna save it so we make sure we have a chance to kind of go back to it. I'm gonna just share this screenshot. This is a screenshot of a post on Facebook that I found. I mean, and I could choose any. I could have chose one of a gazillion of these kinds of posts, but this is a post from a photographer whose customer messaged her and said that she didn't want to work with her anymore because she was posting Black Lives Matter. So this is some of the backlash that people are getting, white folks are getting, for standing in solidarity for justice.
But can I speak on that right quick?
Go ahead.
Actually, I would say it's kind of like she did say that and she got that response, but like that got tons and tons of shares that popped up in my feed all the time. I had people messaging me about her and stuff like she's actually going to get way more business off of that than that one customer. I agree with Sam's perspective that there's great work being done in the community. Like, you know, Shavonda is a good example who has the organization. I think he's referencing Love on Black Women. And I think, you know, the work she's done in general is great, but that's a group right now. Everyone can go on Facebook and like, again, it's Love on Black Women. But to a certain degree, like, you know, there's, yeah, I mean, I think in a capitalistic society, so specifically supporting Black-owned businesses is a good action step as well. And there's a lot, you know, that are in Milwaukee specifically, even though we are very segregated, there's still a lot of great opportunity there. So I think that's, you know, I think that's a good way to direct, you know, some traffic as well and direct some dollars. And again, we have to look at it in the context of, you know, it's not just one snapshot of our society, it's in the context of how things have operated for years and things that weren't that long ago and still happening today that are significantly disadvantageous to, you know, folks that, yeah, like there has to be, you know, there has to be some correction there.
I'm just sharing here the page,
yeah, exactly, yep.
Article about Shavonda, and I watched her live feed in the Shorewood neighborhood, where one of her white neighbors spit on a Black child that was protesting.
Yeah.
So if you're on
that
Facebook,
was quite the feed.
She was fearless and it was incredible. Yeah. And there's a lot of people in the chat who haven't reached that level of fearlessness yet. So as we sort of wrap up, I want any last words that you have for people from your own experience of being brave, because all of us sit at seats that matter. All of us are having conversations that could matter if we speak up and say something. And as white people, it sounds different and it lands differently because of what we're talking about when you say it versus when I say it. Can you give some last thoughts, advice, encouragement for people who are wanting to make a difference every day where they are, to kind of tear this down? I'm going to start with you, Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm first of all, none of us are as brave as Shavonda, so that's a bar we're all aspiring to. Let's be serious.
When she brought out the bullhorn, I was like,
girl, that was a thing of beauty on many levels. So I talk a big game. I you know, bow down to her and her bravery, especially multiplied by the fact that she's a Black woman doing it. So you know, I have less to lose, and I'm still not as brave as she is, and I want to say that publicly. I think you start where you can start, right? I think that we all, I know there were some posts earlier, and first of all, I want to say I'm thankful to people who posted some stuff, which although maybe I didn't agree with, I think, Corey, Joe, to your credit, that you've created a space here where people can be honest and say some things that need to be said. One of the posts was, you know, that, you know, one person mentioned that they weren't really responsible for building this system, and the reality is we're all responsible. In my younger days of deflecting my responsibility, I would say, I'm a second generation Italian. I can't be held responsible. I didn't have slaves, right? And so part of this is just learning and spending years in this space thinking about how my whiteness has benefited me every single day of my life. That doesn't mean I did something wrong. It doesn't mean that it's my fault, right? But let's just be really serious about what privilege we have, and really committed to using that privilege to afford others who have less of it, more of it. And sometimes that means having difficult conversations. But if you, the stakes are too high not to be brave here. The stakes are too high not to do your part, to do what you can within your own circles of influence, within your own spaces, to say, this ain't right. I told my team the other day when we were talking about equity that the one thing I'm not willing to do is to give up my job to somebody else, because I really love my job. And so I crossed that off my list of things I'm willing to do to be a good ally. But there's not much else I'm not willing to do at this point. And I want to be continued to held accountable to that, for how do I show up and how do I keep showing up every day, even though on some days it's super uncomfortable And my feelings get hurt all the time. I get hurt all the time when somebody says, white people be like this. And then I'm like, what I want is, don't ever say not all white people. First of all, there's your lesson. Don't ever write that. It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to say, but not me to yourself. Reflect. It's not about you, and do the work.
That's right. How about you, Jennifer?
I think all the folks who've shown up in this conversation as white people have to just start with that shouldering some responsibility, right? And someone put it in the chat that, we may not have spilled the milk, but we do all have to clean it up, right? Like, just do what your grandmother would have told you to do. Clean up your own mess. Start in your own household, having those tough conversations. But also, I think a lot about legacy. And especially no matter what space you operate in, whether it be in your family space or whether in your corporate space or whether in your nonprofit or education sphere, what would the future you, in 50 years want to look back and know that you did in this moment to make things better and to leave your legacy? And I think when we can start and center from some of those questions, you realize there is a whole lot in it for absolutely all of us to be doing this work and shouldering this responsibility, even when it's uncomfortable and even when it's hard. Keeping that eye on what's the future you want to build looking like, because it's not the future we thought we had.
Stephanie?
I would just say that, starting with myself, it has been a moment of self-reflection, and I've had to strip down to the bare bones of what do I think, where are my fears coming from, why am I afraid of losing my white privilege? Like, I had to really strip down and do just a real heavy duty self-reflection on everything that I carry in my own bias. And I'm still not there yet. But I will say that as far as, my role in trying to enlighten others around me is really just start kind of holding them to task and asking them to strip down and asking them to really self-reflect and look inside themselves. And, on a personal level, that's what I would do in my own personal circles, where I know that there are people around me who are still holding so tightly to that bootstraps mentality and can't let it go and don't understand why there are no bootstraps to hold on to. So that's something a role that I really want to play in just helping people to strip down and figure out why they're so afraid of this advancement of Black people. Why are you so afraid of it? It can only help everybody. So having that conversation, I think, would be my first order of business. And then just supporting and advocating good policy and working toward that end.
Jonathan, last words for folks who are wondering how they can help change all this.
I got something too.
Yeah, I'm coming to you last, Sam.
Oh, okay. You sure you want Sam to go, or you want me to go?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I would say, I think there's a couple things. One is defund the police. We need more money going towards other resources. The police in Milwaukee institutionally represent a very racist institution that has gone on far too long. We're in a place where the political will and capital is shifting, and we can make real change, as evidenced by the resolution put forth by Alderman Perez as well as the others. So that's one. We have to have a serious and uncomfortable fundamental shift of how our resources are being spent in our society, and with a racial equity lens. Two, unabashedly and without any sort of side eye or anything like that, listen to Black people, give money to love on Black women, and don't even accidentally be gaslighting people and stuff like that, especially for their experiences. But just listen, learn, and it's okay. And to go along with the first and second, just generally speaking, as perspective moving forward, make yourself uncomfortable. If you are in situations where you are not the only white person in situations, stuff like that, go put yourself in situations to be so. Obviously, it's a little different with the Rona, but when the time comes, make yourself, uncomfortable at every level, because if you're comfortable, you're not growing, and status quo has got to go. That's part of the problem. So make yourself uncomfortable, contact your alder people right now for changes in municipal government and the mayor's office, as well as the Fire and Police Commission. Let them know what you think, they work for you, and give money to Love on Black Women. And thank you, Siobhan. And thank you, Corey Joe. And thanks for doing stuff like that or whatever.
Absolutely. I'm going to post again the link to find Love on Black Women. Oh, okay. All right, Sam.
Yeah. I'll try to be brief again. To Nicole's point, I think a bunch of people touched on it, but to Nicole's point about like when you're you hear like all white people do this, whatever, and your first response is not all white people. I understand that like being called out is a gift. Like it truly is a gift. Someone is saying like, I care enough about you to take time out of my day, take energy out of my day, especially if it's a person of color, take time and energy out of my day to like teach you how to be a little bit better. That's a gift. Like no ifs, ands, or buts. Like that is someone trying to be there for you, not someone like calling you out of malice. Even if it does sound like malice, that's a gift. Take it. Take it. The only thing I'll like add to what's already been said is we kind of touched on like when white people say things, other white people listen. Say some like radical stuff. It's a family program, but say some radical stuff. Like Jonathan mentioned, like defunding the police. If say my position is like, oh, I believe more in reform than defund or abolition or something like that. If you're first of all, like negotiation 101, you don't like lead with what you want, you lead with like something beyond what you want, and then you actually get what you want. But also you get people to listen much better when you're like very, because not a lot of white people are saying like abolish the police. More white people say it, the more white people are actually going to think about it, right? Because it's no longer just perceived as a black problem. It's well, oh shoot, like white people are talking about this now, like we gotta do something. Is that the way the world should work? Absolutely not. But it is in this present moment in 2020. This is what you can be doing, is really pushing language, pushing what you're saying, and just like saying some really like radical stuff so that we actually get something done rather than just like talk about it for a couple months and hem and haw over whether we think Black Lives Matter or not.
Of course, Joe, can I get one last insight for that?
Yep, go ahead.
One last thing, an action step that people can complete is every day it's going to be people out marching. So find a group, and if you use hand sanitizer before and after, you can kind of socially distance there, wear a mask, but come out with us, come march, and get your friends and family to come out as well. It's making a difference already, putting pressure on the city, make it happen, and get your body out there and get uncomfortable, and that's okay. If you're comfortable, you're not going. If you're going not comfortable, so get out there and march with us.
How can people find out about where the marches are taking place?
Good question. There's two Facebook groups that are pretty good at posting that information every day. One is Milwaukee Marches, like the verb marches, and two is the new Milwaukee Peaceful Protest, I think is the full name of it. But both those groups have daily updates where you can get that information. And right now it's a bunch of ones being done all over by different people and stuff like that or whatever. So I don't think it really matters the most, like you go to this one, go to that one, get out there and do it, and you'll find your space and stuff like that. But get out there, start marching, start chanting, get uncomfortable, and make some changes. And thank you again, Corey Joe. Sorry about that.
Sam, were you going to say something?
I just saw someone in the comments, Jennifer, saying like she's kind of turning formerly conservative parents. First of all, love to hear that. I'm also doing the same thing. I'm pushing abolition to people, white people that I know, and it works. Like it really, really does work. Because you can say like you already have a relationship with someone. You are like the best person to be talking to them about these issues, and so they trust you. And it happened, like one example is a former teacher of mine. She like knows me since I was in high school. And she's like cops in the family. She's very very pro-police, right? I'll just leave it at that. And she's like, I don't see how abolition could work. And we've had a kind of back and forth over the last couple of weeks. And she's moving, she's changing. And I know she's especially, and the beauty is that like, I got her to move a little bit. She's very influential around like with her people. She's gonna get someone else. And I only ask like, if I change your mind, you gotta tell someone else. So like she's gonna move other people, and like that's how you get these systems changing, right? Is like those, it really can, one conversation really can't help.
Thank you so much, because this is the conversation that really helped as people, as evidenced by the comments in the chat. Lots of love and appreciation for all of the panelists. Lots of great links for folks to click on and share. I want to thank you, Nicole, Jennifer, Jonathan, Stephanie, and Sam. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation. I had a feeling that we would need to do a part 2 once we started this one. So we'll figure out what part 2 will look like, and I'm going to ask really quick in the chat. So at the end of these webinars, I've been sort of playing a video or some music or something to share, and giving people a chance to go into the chat to do 2 things: to show love to the panel. If anything moved you, anything was helpful to you, show that love, and I'll make sure I'll share your comments. And secondly, if we do another conversation, and we have more conversations to do that are for everybody, but if we do another conversation that is really focused on white folks as allies, what things would you like to see us discuss and cover? And are there potential panelists that you'd like to hear from? So leave that in the chat. As you're doing that, and before I go to the media that I'll show as we close out, I just kind of want to share a story of pushing the envelope and being radical. We talked a little bit about schools, and I've shared this with the folks that I work here with at MMAC. I was in a meeting where we were talking about the education system, and how the people of color and Black folks are, Black kids are not graduating at the rate, and there's all these disparities. And somebody made a comment, and there was a consensus around that comment. And she said, well, I've talked to some teachers, and I know some people that have been in the classrooms, and they say that these kids' parents just really just don't care. They don't read to them at night, and they're just not engaged. And, it starts in the home. So that comment led to everybody else with it starts in the home thing. And of course, I was the only Black person in the room. And I said, well, I went to a gifted and talented school, and my brother did not. And we both grew up in the same home. And my mom is a single mom. She worked all the time, constantly. So she didn't really have time to really read to me. She didn't really have time to really read to my brother, but I went to such a good school that I knew I was going to excel anyway. The bar for me was set so high, I just didn't have a choice. There was no option for me. And when I grew, in my day, if you went to go to my year, you were going to college. That's it. There was no question. The bar was so high, and that starts at home, but it was reinforced every day. Every time I went to school, I went to a great school. My brother did not go to a great school, and his reality in life post-school was very different than mine. And I kind of raised that to the rest of the room. And I'm like, how many of y'all did your mom your parents read to you every night? That your parents sat and did homework with you every night? And there was nobody in the room that could say that was their experience. They had all gone to these really great schools, but the answer, this fake answer, has become, these Black kids' parents just really don't. And everybody in the room before I said that nodded. And they know in their own lives, you didn't have a parent that read to you. I'm not saying that reading to your kids is not important. I read to my kids. What I'm saying is, it's not the truth that the parents are the reason why the schools are messed up. It's not the truth. I can say that in a room, and I was partly dismissed, probably by half of people in the room. The other half kind of were like, oh, wow, because I cried in the meeting because I felt so angry that this is what these conversations look like. And these are the conversations that I'm in. I can't imagine the ones that I'm not invited into. So I've shared that story because if I heard that and I hear it in meetings, you hear it too. People of all colors and races, you hear it, and you hear the BS, and it's BS. And I'm just saying, call it out. You got to call it out. And that will make you a great ally. So with that, I'm going to go to my little media that I want to share that I think you guys will really enjoy. You guys in the chat can keep chatting, and it's only 5 minutes. So if you want to listen. If the panelists have to go, you guys, please go. Thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank you, Corey.
To all the panelists. I'm so happy to see you, and so glad that you guys could be here. Now, this is one of my favorite personalities and YouTubers. So she's got something to say about being a white ally. So just check her out.
Something different with my setup, and I don't know if it's working, but you will deal. Imagine your friend is building a house and they ask you to help, but you've never built a house before. So it'd probably be a good idea for you to put on some protective gear and listen to the person in charge. Otherwise, someone's gonna get seriously hurt. Look, I'm helping! It's the exact same idea when it comes to being an ally. An ally is a person that wants to fight for the equality of a marginalized group that they're not a part of. We need your help building this house, but you probably should listen so you know what to do first. Let's do this. So here are my 5 tips for being a good ally. Understand your privilege. Now, a lot of people get hung up on the word privilege, so let me break it down for you nice and easy. Privilege does not mean that you are rich, that you've had an easy life, that everything's been handed to you and you've never had to struggle or work hard. All it means is that there are some things in life that you will not experience or ever have to think about just because of who you are. It's kind of like those horses that have those blinders on. They can see just fine. There's just a whole bunch of stuff on the side that they don't even know exists. So for example, there are currently 29 states where you can legally be fired for being gay, and there are 34 states where you can legally be fired for being trans. Now, as a straight cis woman, those are things that I don't have to ever think about if I don't want to. I'm not going to be fired because I'm straight, and I'm not going to be fired because I am cis. So it makes sense that before I can fight for the rights of others, I have to understand what rights I have and others don't. That's privilege. Listen and do your homework. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not possible for you to learn if you aren't willing to listen. So you gotta know when to zippa the lippa. I don't know. You get what I mean. But that's the thing that's so cool about social media. There are so many people sharing their stories all around the world and connecting with people that they normally would never get a chance to without the power of the internet. So do your homework. Start reading blogs, tweets, news articles, and stories so that you can get caught up on the issues that are important to the communities that you want to support. Speak up, but not over. If the Fight for Equality was a girl group, the ally wouldn't be the lead singer or the second lead singer. They'd be Michelle. An ally's job is to support. You want to make sure that you use your privilege and your voice to educate others, but make sure to do it in such a way that does not speak over the community members that you're trying to support or take credit for things that they are already saying. This isn't Mario Kart. Stay in your lane. Realize that you're going to make mistakes and apologize when you do. Nobody's perfect. Unlearning problematic things takes time and work, so you are bound to mess up and trip and fall. But don't worry, you can brush yourself off and get right back up. And back up! Just remember that it's not about your intent, it's about your impact. So when you get called out, make sure to listen, apologize, commit to changing your behavior, and move forward. Last but certainly not least, actually the most important thing on this list is remember that ally is a verb. Saying you're an ally is not enough. You gotta do the work. 1 through 4. 1 through 4. As always, there are links in the video description box to some of the things I mentioned in this video, along with some resources that have been really helpful for me as I've gone along in my journey to be more conscious. So I want to hear from you in the comments. What are some sites that you suggest checking out, and what are some things that have helped you become a better ally? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and help see you when I see you. Bye!
Isn't she great? Let me close this out here because it's making noise. All right, we got 60-something comments from folks. So the panelists have had a chance to kind of go through them. I'm going to share all the links, or as many links as I can, in the follow-up email to everybody that was registered. Thank you again to the panelists, and thanks to everybody who's still listening.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you, Corey.
Happy allying.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to meet you guys.
Bye, guys.